Well, do we have a show for you today? Absolutely. Welcome to the show. Talks with Tyke today. It is April 28th, and just a few days from the Kentucky Derby for anybody who's interested in that. We are. Um, Let me just put a welcome message up here. Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely have a show for you today. Today's show is going to be centered around Uh, two things. Like normally, what we do here is we do a PowerPoint presentation, then we have some talking points based on a lot of those slides, uh, and the things that are happening. So, our discussion today, if you were able to look at the teaser on LinkedIn, it gives you an idea of what we'll be discussing after today's talk. I'll also post the PowerPoint so you can review it whenever you feel like it. I guess it's there for eternity. I don't know. Whatever. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about today. So without further ado, let's get right to our PowerPoint presentation and let's see what that looks like. Okay. So here it is. What I'm calling a dismantled market, um, the economic disruption series. And I know that sounds a little abrasive, but that's just the way it is. And my idea though is to take a look at what's going on here and say, hey, really, what's happening? Why are people having a hard time finding jobs? Me being one of them, or and me being one of many. So we're going to look at the slideshow here, and that should reveal some things that are going on that we can take in consideration instead of our beating ourselves up. Let's look at the hard data and say, hey, maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we just don't see. So, creating a new pathways to economic prosperity, not always easy, but it's something that we may have to be thinking about in order to get things done for our homes, our families, and our neighbors, and all that good stuff. So the jobs aren't gone yet, but the conditions that create them are. The jobs aren't gone yet, just like I said, but the conditions that create them are being dismantled in plain sight. And what happens is we're becoming desensitized to some of the things that are happening right around us, and we're just ignoring it, paying more attention to our phones and more attention to this and more attention to that, but not attention to the things that we used to. For instance, we used to watch the 6 o'clock news and 11 o'clock news, and now we have a news cycle that just doesn't quit. It begins on our phones. It doesn't stop there. So this is what this looked like. What it looks like for through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's a lag, a strong lag, anywhere between 60 and 90 days, and I would offer even as much as 4 to 5 months of lag in the data. And especially under the new administration, we're seeing a lot of different things that we haven't seen before. So that trails in that time period. So that's not great. So what has happened during that lag is a $12 trillion wealth loss. And for anybody who's interested, I also have a website called oilwatch401.com, and it talks about the cost of a barrel of oil, and it compares that to the personal savings of Americans. And it's rather fascinating. So have a look at it. And so Michigan Consumer Index is down from 71.1 in January to 47.8. So anybody keeps an eye on that, you'll know exactly what they're talking about. So in 24 and 26, what was announced and completed, public record, press releases, the SEC filings, they're all verifiable today. Even though we don't have the BLS data, this is what's been talked about. Rite Aid, Big Lots, Walgreens, Dollar Tree, CVS, Dollar General, Macy's, and a lot of these things are just um, being lost right in front of us. And what is also accelerating this rapid job loss and also deaccelerating the job hiring is the fact that solar and wind has been cut out of the energy stack, completely removed. And what has been removed, you see, is solar, wind, clean energy, renewable land permits, loan programs for clean tech, over 200,000 jobs losses in energy. They're at risk. What remains in oil and gas, the only active part of that energy stack, drilling, federal land permits up 40%. Some people will cheer that. But let me say that again. Federal land permits up 40%. That should scare people more than people should be celebrating, in my opinion. The export facility approvals is accelerated. FERC, that we'll get to, FERC, we'll get to that in a slide here in just a little bit. Fast tracking fossil pipeline approvals more so than ever. And refining, the capacity maintained by policy design and hiring. Selective, one sector, very, very narrow scope. So the silent cut, what is invisible to the private sector payroll data? So when we see cuts like that we heard, USAID, Department of Education, HHS, IRS, Forest Service, EPA, we've lost 200,000 federal workers terminated or bought out. 18% reduction in federal civilian workforce, 1/5. That means 1 out of every 5 gone. That should scare you. It scares me. 24 agencies impacted by DOGE reductions. That should scare you. And that's a fact. Consumer confidence falls first. So that's what happens here. When you see this, look at this line graph here. Confidence will go down and then employment data eventually catches up. So we're not seeing a real-time picture over here. What we're witnessing is the feel of it after it's happened 3, 4, 5 months ago. That's what happens. So again, what you feel today is what the data prints for the next quarter, at least 3 months, and maybe we get that towards the back end of that second quarter, which could be as much as 6 months. So here's the slide that I talked about FERC. And FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, it's not one of those things that we hear about all the time, but we should. It's a relatively new agency, and it has been used now to do the things that were not so pleasant. It's been used to control energy that has excluded a big portion of that energy stack. That's how it's been used. So we're not getting wind and solar and some of the other green parts of our energy sector because of the administration. So 5 presidentially appointed commissioners who are supposed to be bipartisan. We've seen in the past how these things have been weaponized and how the Department of Energy specifically, as just one agency, has been weaponized, which follows a certain rule book from other countries. We've seen this, how they use energy as a means of controlling the populace. So here, these controls are interstate electricity transmission. So before these things happen, natural gas pipelines, hydroelectric licenses, wholesale power markets, oil pipeline rates. But you see here in the green section, renewable stall. Clean energy interconnection queues now delayed 5+ years under these new rules. The current administration directing FERC to expedite natural gas pipeline approvals. Who benefits? Who benefits when jobs vanish quietly in the night? And it wouldn't be complete without a Machiavellian view here, which I'm trying to include in most of these things to get an idea. So the princess who relies upon their words, what people say, and what principalities and what principalities, democracies, what they say without having otherwise provided for himself is ruined. Labor data is controlled by the executive branch. Is the lag convenient? Is that a convenient lag? And retail closure shifts spending online. Who owns the digital rails there? Desperate workers accept worse terms. Who captures the margin difference? Look, folks, we're headed in the wrong direction. Where hiring is happening right now. So we got a bunch of gloom here, and we really do. But let's see, dismantled markets always create new routes. And there's a lot of truth to that. The talent is already moving. Where is it moving to? AI and automation. That's hot. Prompt engineers, AI trainers, LLM ops and roles. But I ask you, who has been hired recently in AI that you know of, other than an engineer? Uh, AI trainers. How many people have been hired as AI trainers? How many LLMs operation roles have there really been? That's what they're saying. Healthcare, we know, is almost a mainstay. And cybersecurity, absolutely. But we can see that diminishing what's going on here when we're outsourcing all these things to other countries. So the CHIPS Act, grid hardening is still active in the infrastructure, creator economy, brand shifting from retail to direct, D2C, grid modernization, utilities upgrading, even as policy fights. So what is verifiable? What is timestamped? What is public record here? The retail closures, energy under FERC, federal workforce, DOGE, which is now a government agency. Consumer confidence at the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey. I would tell everybody, go look at that. The labor and BLS, look at that. Look what's happening over there. That's pretty much a macro context in the big picture here. The Federal Reserve, the FRED database. Look at that. It'll help you. So, okay. And from there, we come back here and now thinking about, as we think about those things, the initial question has been from the beginning for us. The jobs aren't gone yet, but the conditions that create them are being dismantled in plain sight. The labor market looks stable on paper because the data lags, and we talked about that anywhere from 60 to 90 to as much as 6 months. So if these agencies are going to report at the back end of the second quarter, we're talking about 6 months rather than just at the beginning of the new quarter. But even if it were at the beginning, we're still at least 3 months behind, and a lot can happen in 3 months. What we're documenting today isn't exactly what's happened or happening. It is what's happening, and what will show up in the numbers later on if we pay attention to it. So that's the early warning system there. And retail closures, we saw that in our slide deck. Verifiable signal that what we have right now, over 7,000 stores, Rite Aid, CVS, Macy's, closing all over the place. Press releases, SEC filings, public announcements. It's not opinion, folks. It's public record. And every closed store is a job that won't be in the next BLS report. Think about that for a minute. So solar and wind didn't just stall. They didn't just like, oh, what happened to solar? Anybody who was keeping up with the energy grid in Texas just a couple of years ago saw what happens in that mix there. But what stood tall in the Texas energy grid at that time was solar and wind, and it provided as much as 12% to that whole grid. 1/8 of all of its production right there that never got to that. So losing solar and wind in our energy stack is not um, in any way helping us solve the energy crisis, which will ultimately reduce household costs. It's not doing that right now. What it's doing is putting more dollars in the hands of too few people who control this. That's what's happening. So solar and wind not being in our energy stack is a huge problem. And the oil that we do here through fracking, through our refineries, and if any, you can check this out, but refineries aren't being built anymore. There's just not enough oil for oil companies to subsidize or even accept the cost of creating these giant oil refineries. The money's not there because it doesn't make any sense to create an oil refinery where we have the depletion of oil. So it just the math doesn't work. Federal workforce cuts, and we looked at what that meant and what that 24 different agencies, over 200,000 federal workers. The government is a major employer. I live in Virginia. I live in the valley. But let me tell you something about when you travel up this valley, you turn right on 66 and you head towards um, the Beltway. Those individuals who do work and have worked um, create communities all throughout Virginia. Just because you might be living on a farm somewhere in Indiana doesn't mean the role of the people and the role that they play in their jobs doesn't mean as much in the whole mix as your job does at the local whatever store. So if you want for what you want is the same thing that these people want, jobs, folks, jobs. So consumer confidence, which we touched on, it's the real-time signal. It's in free fall. And again, go to the University of Michigan, look at the Consumer Sentiment Index and how that went from 71.1 um, in January 2025 when the new administration took office, and how it is now 1 year and a couple of months in a free fall at 47.8. Look it up. This index has historically led employment deterioration by 2 to 3 months. So if you want to know where the jobs are going, you want to look there. And we talked about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, their how historically that has been run. But what we need to do is talk more about FERC, make that a household word for other people to understand that the reason we're seeing giant, heavily increasing costs in energy is because wind and solar have been removed out of the energy mix. That's just a part of it. And this dismantling of the market or markets is already creating new pathways. So there is some hope on the horizon somewhere that that money is actually flowing. I don't know if this is true, but we're hearing a lot about AI. I talk to people in my area over here, and people are so averse to that. They use it, but you're not walking into a market over here, and you're watching everybody just sitting around talking about robots and automation and how losing their job and their perception of losing their job has been good news for their home, their family, their communities. So this is not a group hug for AI, and you're talking to a person who's done certifications now for in AI. I've done a lot in AI. I have a pretty broad understanding of how AI works, the impacts it creates. I get it, but we're not seeing the goodness in the workforce that AI had assured us what was going to happen. What we're hearing about at the national level, how it's eliminating and I'm not blaming AI on something an administration is doing. I'm not blaming AI on that. AI will eliminate some jobs. That's a matter of fact. But other industries have eliminated jobs. That's a matter of fact too. So the most dangerous thing you can do right now is wait for the data to confirm what you're already feeling, what you already know, what you already realize, what's already happening, and you can see it all around you. Just remember, by the time BLS comes around and they print what's happening in our economy, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as it's talking about jobs, the early people that were in on that, they've already repositioned themselves. They've already moved on, and we haven't even caught up to that. So the conversation today is about documenting this present moment where we are. The store closures, the energy contacts, the federal cuts, the sentiment crash, boom, before it shows up in these numbers that lag. And again, anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We won't see it. We won't. And if we go back 6 months and say, what happened? What happened? There's not a lot of that going on. People are talking about this stuff at dinner every day, but they're afraid to talk because the polar oppositions here and the strong oppositions to building our communities. So I would say come to these sessions, talks with Tyke. Bring your receipts. Push back on me. Tell me that I'm wrong. I would love to hear that. I want to hear that talk. Maybe I'm just completely missing things. I hope the information that I'm sharing with you today is not only accurate, which I know it to be, I've done the research. I'm hoping that this data not supports my mind. I'm hoping that this data supports a breakthrough of how we're going to treat our homes, our neighborhoods, things of that nature. How we're going to do great things of that nature. How we make a big splash in our own neighborhood. It's about that for everyone around us. I say this as I'm broadcasting live on YouTube. So, somewhat disingenuous of me, but I understand that. I'm not saying I have a bigger or greater message, and therefore I'm entitled to this space. What I am saying is that we're all in this together, and we all have a stake in the outcome. That's a fact. Whether you choose to be passive or whether you choose to be energetic, it's your decision. It's not mine. It's not my decision. I have a decision that's going to work for me. Last week we talked about credentials and connections. I think that's a conversation that needs to happen a lot more. This talk here about where are the jobs, I think it's similarly as important. I'm doing things I never thought I'd be doing. I'm learning a great deal, but I'm profiting much less. Now, I need to change my own behavior to try and get ahead of this. Certainly. Um, and one other note, we'll finish a few minutes early this session, but we hold a party every year, Kentucky Derby, in honor of the longest running American sporting event, certainly the fastest, uh, and the most exciting 2 minutes in all of sports. So there'll be no talks with Tyke on Thursday in preparation of our annual party. Uh, it's a really nice time for us to reunite with friends, family, people in our neighborhoods to say, "Hey, thanks. I'm glad you're here to share another year of experience of the world. Maybe we can catch up on a few things, or maybe we just have time to share with good food, good talks, and making stronger connections and renewing these connections and just reestablishing um, relations with other human beings. There's generally anywhere between 40 to 60 people that come to our home and spend about an hour and a half with us. So it's a really good time for us. Um, and so we try to make that as inviting to all our guests. And so this has been a tough talk because it touches on some subjects that aren't getting a whole lot of notice, not a whole lot of neon lights flickering and that kind of thing. But it's a talk of truth. Um, it's we do have areas where we can build on to make us more aware and strengthen our resolve to do things better. So, our my wish for you is that you have a great week. We'll pick up next Tuesday, and I'll have some subject matter that we can talk about. And if you know of anybody who wants to spend a little time talking about these issues, please feel free to share our um, our space here on YouTube Live. That's ampersand Tyke Sergliano is the YouTube channel, and we hope you have a good week. Thanks for showing up today, and again, I will be putting this portion of the talk on LinkedIn a little later on today. So with nothing else, we'll say goodbye. We'll see you next time. Hope you have a great week, and let's pray for 20 horses that going to head out the field this week in Kentucky. So thank you. Take care.